welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is from the incredible mind of SakuraCircuit over on Reddit No Sleep. As ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled Ignore the Noises in the Wood Behind Cedarburrow. Let's get straight into that. In 1986, there was a camping trip. I and a couple of friends from college wanted to get away for the week that summer. We lived in a decent-sized town in British Columbia and with a fairly large university where we had all met each other. All of us were thinking of majoring in business, and with a few of us planning minors in economics, English, etc. And nothing was particularly of note about the five of us. We were simple students from simple families. None of us thought that we were going to change the world. None of us thought that we would be of historical note. We were, the five of us, content in our mundanity. We were also good friends in this regard, and so, in the summer of 1986, we wanted to go camping. Well, there were some good camping sites around the town we lived in, but they were all highly populated by other college students and adventurous couples. The kinds of sites where you couldn't walk 10 meters without encountering another crushed beer can or cigarette butt. And we didn't want to go camping. We wanted to go camping. Crown land camping, as people around here called it. The problem was that, as I said, everywhere near our town was populated and highly trafficked. Of course, however, this was British Columbia. The forests and mountains were nearby and dense, and there were more than a couple of places to pitch a tent. After some looking around at tourist help centres and flipping through hundreds of pamphlets, I managed to find a place that promised everything we were looking for, and it was called Cedarburrow. A small town with a population no more than 5,000, and judging by the photographs in these pamphlets, it seemed like it was home to only one actual traffic light. And half the roads were dirt or gravel. Notably though, the pamphlet spoke of thick forestry, with coursing rivers and open valleys, ideal for a day hike. The pamphlet also had a strange warning that the town had a very little lighting, and it was not recommended to spend much time outside after dark. I wish now that I had listened to this warning before telling my friends, who immediately and excitedly agreed to make their 3-hour drive out to Cedarburrow that Monday. Of the five of us, my name was Robert, and the rest were Gordon, Jason, and Danny, and with the fifth being Julie, Danny's girlfriend. Now, Julie's dad had just bought a new pickup a couple of years before, so Julie bought this old station wagon off him. It was one of those ugly family wagons from the early 70s, with the wood panels down the side and beige paint. It didn't matter what it looked like though, because to 5 first-year college students, it was a vision of freedom. And so we shoved 2 tents in the back, as Danny and Julie insisted on having their own, and filled a cooler with beers, wieners, eggs, and some other snacking food. The kinds of things kids our age would bring on a week-long trip out to Crown Land. Everybody brought extra clothes, and Gordon made sure to bring fire-starting things, a hammer for the tent poles, a compass, and for whatever reason, a large serrated machete. When I questioned him about it, he simply said, "You'll never know when you'll need to cut a branch up, and it's better to have it in a car, just in case." Danny and Julie were too busy whispering to each other to even notice, and Jason was under the hood looking at the distributed cap and rotor. Now, his dad was a mechanic, and I guess it just rubbed off on him to always have maintenance in the back of his mind. Nevertheless, after we had everything packed up, we loaded ourselves in and started a 3-hour journey out to Cedarburrow. Rural British Columbia is really beautiful in the summer. The smell of pine and the cold pockets of air was such a relief after a year of college studies. Yet still the drive seemed to go on forever. 3 hours is a much longer time than you think, when all you have to entertain yourself with is your friend and his girlfriend giggling together in the front seat, and the ever enjoyable game of keeping Gordon's sleeping head off your shoulder. I had lived in the province my entire life, but I must admit I had never actually gone this far east. Usually for a family trip, we always went out to the water or even to the island, if possible. I had never even been camping before, but judging by Jason's calm demeanor at the lack of civilization, I figured there was no cause to worry. I finally woke Gordon up when we approached a tiny wooden sign on the side of the road that read Cedarburrow, and nothing more. We continued into town and found it was a truly small place indeed. The entire town was built around one center intersection, where a single traffic light was found. The lights were already flashing yellow at just before noon. I don't think it would be too far-fetched to assume that they always were. Now, according to the pamphlet, we needed to take a left at the main intersection and continue on for 3.5 kilometers until a fork. As we did, the townsfolk seemed to eye us up as if inspecting us. They seemed like the type of people that did not get many visitors and stuck their nose in any excitement that came their way. Every shop was open, but not many people were inside. Bakeries, floral shops, and carpenters, the kinds of places you'd expect to inhabit such a small place. So we left Cedarburrow just as quickly as we entered it and continued on this road for 3.5 kilometers as we were instructed to. As Cedarburrow descended into the thick pine behind us, we passed the occasional house, all of them with fences and gates around their expansive lots, and all with wooden shutters on every window. I thought that these people must have valued their privacy, and perhaps we were intruding on that. And we took the exit at the fork onto the gravel road. The gravel road turned into a gravel path, and the gravel path turned into a dirt path. Eventually, we were entirely engulfed by the forest. I decided we should stop the car there so we could at least find our way back easily at the end of the week. And Gordon, Jason, and I unloaded the food and kit, and Gordon got Danny and Julie to grab the tents. There was a small beaten path that led to a slight clearing in the woods, which seemed like as good of a place as any to set up. A creek was nearby and a river was beyond it. The water rushed and trickled, and it could all be heard from our flat patch that would serve as our new home. We set up our tents while Gordon dragged some bigger fallen logs over to use as benches. He had begun digging a small pit we could use for a fire, and Jason went off into the woods to grab some sticks and kindling to get it going. Danny and Julie seemed very intent on getting their tent up in time for sundown. So much so, in fact, that I was not awarded any help pitching the tent that Gordon, Jason, and I were going to share. After all our preparation, it was already getting cooler, and the sun had disappeared into the dense trees, nearly ready to set. Jason grabbed some beers from the cooler, and Gordon started getting a fire going. Julie wondered why this place wasn't overrun with tourists already, because it seemed to be the perfect place for a getaway. We enjoyed the fire and shared our beers. We talked for hours on hours about school, gossip, life, and everything. And the night was pitch dark, and we were getting tired, so Gordon put out the fire with water from the creek. He doused it, stirred it, and then doused it again. He was always the outdoorsy one, while the rest of us just wanted to retire to our sleeping mats in the safety of the tents. Everybody shuffled drunkenly into the tents, but I had to do my business, and so I stumbled into the woods a bit, away from the rest of the group. I leaned my shoulder against a tree and did my thing, when I could have sworn I heard a groaning or creaking noise from hundreds of meters away. I thought it must have been a tree bending in the wind, as I had been informed by tourist centers that bears didn't get this close to town, and we did not worry about it. I finished up and made my way back to camp, but just on the edge of our clearing, I heard what I could only describe as a whisper. A whisper not in any language that I've ever known or heard. A couple of words at first, but complete silence when I stopped in my tracks to hear it better. I turned around slowly and tried to let my eyes adjust to the darkness to see what was there. Nothing. Total silence. And just the trickle of the water and the rustle of leaves. I got back to the tent where I found Gordon and Jason already in bed and tucked myself in to sleep. The next morning was dewy and cool. The smell of pine was nearly overwhelming, and the rustle of the tent was the perfect wake-up alarm. We didn't have much planned for that day, so we just kind of hung around the campsite all morning. Jason made us scrambled eggs in a cast pan over a fire, and we slowly woke up. blankets draped over our shoulders. Gordon was the first one awake and didn't seem at all bothered by the cold morning air. He stood at the end of our sight, peering longingly into the creek. I decided I wouldn't bother him. That day, we went on a mild hike around the wilderness, taking in the forest air and enjoying the view. We snacked and snapped photos and got ourselves good and tuckered out. When we got back to the campsite afterwards, I noticed that Gordon had still not said a word all day, and immediately returned to his spot at the creek. We felt as though something was bothering him, and I thought it was best to let him work it out himself. In the afternoon, Jason made some food again while Gordon sat silently on his own log, and Danny and Julie whispered in each other's ears. We all ate and drank and enjoyed another sunset in the wood, until Danny and Julie said they were going to walk off together for a little bit, and that they would be back soon. That left Jason and I alone with Gordon, who was staring intently now at the flame of the fire. Jason and I exchanged glances that seemed to ask each other if we should bring it up, but neither of us did. The three of us sat in total silence amidst the crackling of the fire and the rustling of leaves. Occasionally, a short shriek or whooping noise would come from the woods, and Jason and I would lightly giggle to each other. We thought Danny and Julie weren't being as discreet as they had hoped. Eventually, as the forest became dead silent, Gordon got up and walked swiftly and neatly to the tent, where I presume he went to sleep. Jason and I figured he probably wanted to be alone for some reason, and we decided we would sleep in the car that night. At about the same time we were getting up to put out the fire, Danny and Julie returned. Their expressions were blank, and the whispers and giggles were gone. Danny stopped in his path and looked directly at Jason and I, and then continued with Julie to the tent. We thought that something must have happened on their little couple's retreat, and left it at that. And with the fire out, we went to the car. On the next morning, I woke up cramped and sore. Sleeping on a bench seat sounds much more comfortable than it actually is. I looked out the window and saw that Gordon, Danny and Julie were all already awake, and standing peculiarly at the edge of the site together. All three were looking purposefully into the creek, and so I shook Jason awake without averting my eyes. Jason looked over at them through half-sleeping eyes and was immediately shaken. Something was seriously wrong here. I cranked the window down about halfway and yelled out to them. The three of them didn't respond to any name we tried. Jason reached to the back of the car and grabbed the machete Gordon had brought. Gordon suddenly looked upwards towards the trees and began walking, with Julie and Danny soon following. Jason and I quickly threw on some clothes and shoes and stepped out of the car to chase after them. We must have spent all day looking for these three, but never got any response from when we called out their names. Gradually, our feet got tired and we started getting more and more lost. We had to return to camp to get the car and go to get help. When we got back, however, the tents were torn and the cooler was tipped over into the creek. We hurried to the car and started it. It was already afternoon and would soon be sundown. As we drove along the road back to Cedarburrow, we stopped at every house asking for a phone to call for help for a missing person. But every time we told a local about a missing person, their eyes widened and they shut and locked their door. After about 10 houses, we realized we may be on our own and returned to the campsite for one last attempt, as we didn't want to leave them in the forest during a 3-hour drive back to our hometown. When we returned, we saw Gordon, Danny and Julie standing again in the campsite. This time, they were huddled around the center, facing each other. The sky was getting dim and the night was approaching, and so Jason got out the car and started yelling at them, yelling for them to come back to the car so we could get the hell out of there. They didn't seem to hear a word, or at least listen to him at all. And Jason got closer and closer, and I quietly shouted out the window for him to come back, because he'd left the machete in the car, and I didn't have any idea of what was about to happen. And when he was almost right on top of them, the three of them snapped their gaze towards him and pounced. They grabbed a hold of him and carried him quickly into the leaves. I heard his screams for help get quieter and farther away with every moment, but I must admit I was completely frozen in fear. If this had been some kind of practical joke, it wasn't funny anymore. He yelled my name over and over until finally it just stopped. There was no scream of pain, no groan or yelp. Complete silence. Birds didn't even flee from the branches. It was as if nothing had ever happened at all. All I heard was the trickle of the creek and the swaying of the trees. I needed help, and so I put the car in gear and tried to get out of that infernal place. I drove well over 80 kilometers an hour back up the winding gravel path that we had followed. The sun was getting ever lower, and the sky was getting darker, and so I was looking out for any source of light along the road. In an instant, I saw Gordon jump up onto the raised gravel road right in front of the car. I had no time to slow down and hit him with a full force and speed. I am certain that he didn't survive. The car tumbled and rolled into the trees, eventually landing upright and completely out of sight of the road. When I woke up to hooting and whooping sounds outside the car. They sounded distant and quiet, but their source was obviously incredibly loud, just very far away. There must have been thousands of mouths making these sounds, spread out among the woods. The night was deep now, and I couldn't risk leaving the car, so I grabbed the machete and ducked into the half-crushed footwell for refuge. The noises were incessant and horrible, inhuman shrieks and howls, but somehow no doubt created by human vocal cords. In the early morning, the noises had stopped, and I ventured out of the car and up the steep climb to the gravel road. I walked down it for a couple of hours and saw that every gate was closed and every window shuttered. And with this and their behavior to missing persons, it became evident that the local people knew of this phenomenon. And I feared if I went to the town, in my beaten and tattered state, I would be treated as one of these things. I didn't dread what would happen to me, so in a choice of being torn apart by human or torn apart by these creatures, I chose refuge in the car. I'd go out in the day and catch fish or scavenge berries. I no longer wear my old clothes, but rather some ill-fashioned tunic made from my camp blankets. Occasionally, closer to the night, I'll catch one of these Luciferian monsters and hack the life out of it, or what little is left anyway. It's hard to tell how long I've been like this now, but thankfully I have seen only 10 or 20 cars drive down this path since my ordeal. Every single one I saw, I scared away with a mixture of high-pitched squeals and throwing rocks. One of these hiking groups happened to drop some kind of pager with an extraordinarily detailed screen to it. It reminded me a little of my father's pager, which I had messed around with a couple of times before behind his back. However, this device seems to have some form of conference calling to it. Hundreds of people paging each other at the same time. They try to double back and grab it from me, but I keep anything that interests me now. This interested me greatly. I'm not sure how to perfectly operate it, but I hope this page at least will be sent to someone important. I get no help from locals, and so I have resorted to stealing whatever supplies I can out of sheds and unlocked cars. The only local habitant that caught the misfortune of my sight immediately drew rifle and tried to end me. And to walk all the way back to my hometown now, it's impossible, unless as a suicide attempt. All I can do now is keep looking for the rest of my friends, in hopes of maybe making some kind of connection with them again. And so, to whoever this page is sent to, I beg you, if you find yourself in this godforsaken town, get inside before dark. And if you don't, then heed this at least. Ignore the noises in the wood behind Cedarburrow. Wow. Certainly another one. Wow. Once again, another refreshing story on the deep woods genre. That's from the incredible mind of SakuraCircuit over on Reddit No Sleep. Big thank you, Sakura, for allowing me to narrate your story on the show. Really did enjoy this story very much, and I certainly look forward to more of your work in the future. Well, guys and girls as ever, you know the drill. Please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid Crew. If you're an aspiring writer or would just like to have a crack at things like myself, then please do get in touch with me at the brand new email, which is as on screen. Contact thedeadone@gmail.com. I really look forward to hearing from you. I hope everybody's feeling well this week, making the most of the last of the summer sun, possibly getting in one last camping trip, or maybe you're flat out like myself with work and just general life. Whatever it is that you do, I hope you're enjoying it and you're getting stuck in. But above all, guys, remember, be safe, not sorry.